class ever again. That is the worst.
Concepts. It wasn't for.
No. Listen. I'm not telling you got a 0. I already graded it anyway. No. Listen. Don't listen. I'll tell you. I'll tell you. There are certain financial concepts. If you want hard finance stuff, Wikipedia is excellent. Believe it or not. A lot of finance professors have put. So if you want to know something about like time value of money concepts, net present value, it's, statistical concepts, Wikipedia is great. Investopedia is like garbage. It's wrong a lot of times. It's incomplete. Seriously, don't ever use Investopedia again, okay? And I'm not trying to call you out. I'm just saying you guys have to be careful. That was one of the ones that I had, you know. No, but I don't want you to cut and paste something. I want you to articulate things in your own words. Why? So you understand it. Because if you cut and paste it, did you really assume it? Did you really own it? Right? Most of these things had a follow-on question, which was why? Why do you think it's important? Why do you think the opinion is addressed here? Okay? Why do you think fixed or variable rate debt is better? And a lot of the answers didn't have the whys. And for me, getting the answer was you got a PDF. If the one you had, you know, didn't have OCR, you run OCR through it, and then you do a search, and you knock this thing out in 30 minutes. That's not the purpose of this is to learn. It's not to cut and paste garbage. It's to learn. It's to suffer. It's to go through and say, let me think about this. Let me think about it. Why? You know, why might off-balance sheet transactions be relevant or not? Why is the opinion issued to the board of directors? Who's the board of directors? And what do they represent? What constituency do they represent? Who does the auditor work for? Who's he auditing? I mean, if you don't go through that thought process and you just wrote to the board of directors and shareholders of X and don't even answer the why is it? Somebody answer that question for me. Tell me why.
To give credibility to the financial statements from an outside party.
Okay, but why address it to the board of directors? Why don't you address it to...
Because they ultimately make voting decisions.
Why do they make voting decisions?
They own the company. Their shares.
Because the auditors work for the owners of the company, not the managers. Who's responsible for the financial statements of a company? Management. 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 Why do auditors come in? Essentially to review and validate the financial statements that management have produced for the owners. Now, an audit opinion extends to a bunch of other people because that audit report then will go to a bank, may go to shareholders, may go into the public domain. And a lot of auditors today are at risk because there's fraudulent financial statements. Somebody said, hey, I bought stock based on that financial report. But the real nexus that exists between an auditor and a company is the responsibility that auditors have to the owners of the company. And the board of directors is who?
Elected by the shareholders.
It's a proxy, it's the representative body of the shareholders of a company. And so, if the answer was to the board of directors, and that's it, yeah, I'm not saying the answer was wrong. Well, you didn't do the whole answer, so you probably should take... In fact, I had you print these things. Why do you think I had you print them? Because you're going to grade them. And you're going to turn them in, because I want to compare your grades with my grades. Seriously. Seriously. So you grade it as we go through the questions. So when you look at that question, the answer is to the board of directors, or to the board of directors and shareholders. And why is it so? Because the auditors are hired by the shareholders, and they report to the shareholders on the performance of management and on the financial report that management has put together. Okay, that's that question. So we needed to go a little bit beyond that, okay? So there was another one. I don't want to be, I think it was you too. I think it was you. Somebody wrote, I got this from my TD Ameritrade account. Oh, that was you, okay. All right, so here. Okay, nothing wrong with that. Nothing wrong with that totally. what you're gonna learn this coming week is, so who used like Yahoo Finance for stuff, okay? So, here's the problem. When you use third-party information, the question is it accurate? So, did you go to any of the home builder other websites and pull out the information you were looking for? No. So how do you know, who works at TD Ameritrade that you trust to accumulate that data? They probably got it from one of these sources. My personal experience is a lot of these services are going to be directionally accurate, but not necessarily so. Okay? And you'll find in a case study this week, if you calculate your own ratio analysis, then you know it's right. If you follow somebody else's, you don't know what's in there. I can tell you, when I'm doing screening for stocks, for example, one of the first things I always look at, and I use Schwab, but this all ultimately points back to the same 3 or 4 guys that accumulate this data. Sometimes you look at a balance sheet, and over 3 years, they might say, other assets, 20 billion. Then the next year it says, intangibles, 20 billion. Then the next year it says, goodwill, 20 billion. And the question is, will the real assets stand up? I don't know what it is. So I got to go, if I want to know what that is, I got to go to the balance sheet of that company and see it. So you can say, oh shit, I didn't want to spend that much time on this shit. I just wanted. But my point is, you got to go to source. You want the right answer? Sorry, can you erase that shit? No. If you want the right answer, you got to go to the source material. If you don't go to the source material, you're going to get garbage. Okay, you're going to get garbage. I got a bunch of. Hold on, I'll go to that one. So who did we had? DR Horton. We had Lennar. What else? MCI. Somebody did, or Meritage Homes.
NVR.
MVR. Pulte.
Yeah.
No. Which one did you pick? Did you? Were those the ones that pretty much?
Top 5.
Did anybody do like Hovnanian or Toll Brothers? No.
GL. GL.
GL is not publicly traded that I'm aware of.
Well, I think it is.
Is it? GL Homes, like the one in Dade County? Well, look, you got that report?
I saw they had a report. They had a 10K.
You saw it? Okay, I'll take a look at that.
I could buy an MI homes, but
Okay, no, but you didn't do it on GL.
no.
Okay, no, I don't think. Now they may have had some debt outstanding. I don't know, but anyway. So how do you find the population? How do you find? You go to the S&P registry of industry, right? The classification, or you go to your TD Ameritrade account and look under. You do a screen and you look for publicly traded home builders. Home builders are considered what?
Durable.
Consumer durables. Okay. Yeah, believe it or not. And REITs now have their own classification, but REITs before, up until last year, were under financial institutions. So just, you just got to know. Okay, so let's go through the questions. What's question number 1, guys? So the question is, what do these people do, right? By the way, most of you had, quote, the right answer. The right answer really was a very brief and short answer. And that question was, they're a home builder. If you would have told me they're a home builder, well, that tells me who they are and what they do. Because home builders, in particular, have a very unique characteristic. They are a self-integrated developer that sells single-family homes. Now, that's changing a little bit. You're starting to see more multifamily. Some of these guys are actually starting to own multifamily the whole, but for the most part, home builders buy big chunks of land, right? Or buy developed lots already, drop the cookies on it, they build it themselves, they market it themselves, and what else do they do? Most of these guys, well, they market it, so they sell it. What else do a lot of these guys do, the big guys?
Finance.
They finance it. Now, I don't want to get into accounting, but here's my question. If Lennar has a financing subsidiary that provides financing for Alana to buy a house, and she puts 5% down and you provide 95% of the financing, do we really have a sale here? Well, so people have recognized it as such. I mean, so nobody's kind of looked at that, but I've always had the concern as to whether there really is adequacy of down payment. Now, eventually if they package that mortgage and sell it to somebody else, now you got your money. But at the time of the sale, have they really collected it, and is the buyer really at risk? Okay, but anyway, I don't want to get into this. Home building, pretty simple. Question number 2. Name 5 publicly traded home builders. So the question is the following. Identify which one of the other 5 you perceive to be in a better financial position. Better and worse. Okay, so I was looking for 2, and the question was why? Okay. Who wants to give me their answer? Who feels good about their answer?
I'll give it to you. I don't feel
I'll give it a
Oh,
shot.
come on, feel good. Do it with confidence. Be confident. Come on, man.
I'll say D.R. Horton
Okay.
is positioned better than Pulte.
Okay, because?
Generates superior returns on invested capital, on assets and equity, and better interest coverage, as well as lower debt to total capital.
ROI, what else did you say?
ROI, interest coverage. And then
Where'd you get those numbers? Did you go to Pulte's?
I used Brandon's TD Ameritrade. No, I used or actually
Okay.
Wall Street Journal and dive into operating.
Okay, so you said that they were better, in better financial position because they had a higher ROI?
Yes.
Okay, so this kind of talks to returns, right? Return on investment, okay? So that's a yield, basically. Okay, all right. And this is debt service coverage, this is what? Ability to service debt. Okay? Give me one that was worse.
KB Homes.
Okay, and why was KB Homes worse?
They decreasing revenue, year-over-year revenue, and net income figures.
So decreasing revenues,
Yes.
okay? So this is, okay, an income statement item, yep. And?
As well as, income and lower, what is it? Income
But you
cover-
have it in front of you, you don't have to guess.
It was interest coverage as well, at a lot lower.
So
2.37.
lower debt service coverage, okay. Somebody else give me some other, Jeffrey.
Earnings growth between D.R. Horton and Lennar.
Okay, so D.R. Horton had, what, when you say earnings, what kind of earnings?
Earnings growth.
Okay, but like gross margin, net income?
Net income.
Net income. Okay, okay, no. Listen, these are all, listen, we're thinking through this. So you're saying net income growth is higher in D.R. Horton than it is in Lennar. Okay?
Actually, it was the opposite. Lennar's looking at
Okay.
18% growth, and D.R. Horton was looking at 10 for the next.
Okay, but what if these guys had a higher absolute net income margin? Would that have mattered?
Yeah.
So if these guys have a 20% net income margin and these guys have 10, and this one's growing faster, is it really better? Okay, you don't have to answer that. Okay, but again, we've got an income statement concept here, okay? What else? Who's worse?
Well, D.R. Horton was 8% less than earnings growth.
Okay, but that's, and who was better then?
Lennar.
Okay, so you just said, but there was 2 questions, who's better and who's worse? You're supposed to pick 2 different people.
Well, I picked.
Or maybe you didn't get all the whole answer.
D.R. Horton was trailing Lennar.
Okay, but who was your company?
D.R. Horton.
Okay, so Lennar was better. Who was worse?
Then both.
Yeah. You
Well,
didn't get there.
I didn't pick the third.
Okay, all right, okay. No, but that was the other question. Give me, somebody else, give me one more. We'll go one more. Brandon, come on. Okay, Sean.
I said that Lennar had more land ownership than Pulte Group, so they were positioned better.
Okay, so you said they had more
More
land,
land ownership.
okay? And what if, I mean, I don't want to jump to the gun on this one, but what if the land isn't as desirable? Okay, and who was worse?
Pulte Group,
Because?
because they had less land ownership.
Okay, and you were comparing, you were who? What homes were you?
That was MDR.
Okay, and so you thought Lennar was better and Pulte was worse, for the same reason?
Yeah, pretty much. the
Pretty
same
much
way.
so, okay. All right, so let me, there's no right or wrong answer, and I'm sorry if I pick on, don't be afraid to come up if I pick on you, okay? But, so the first thing is, when I talk about financial position, we differentiated very clearly last week between a balance sheet and an income statement. And we talked about financial position or condition as of a particular date, and we talked about results of operations. And so anytime we start talking about comparison, so I want to know who's in better financial position, who's in better financial condition, okay? Ultimately, your results in operation may put you in a better financial position or not, okay? But then trends related to your operations probably are not as indicative to your balance sheet as some other type of analyses that we could, consider or use in that area. So let me give you an example. If I look at margins, Jeff, I probably would look at a home builder, I would look more at gross margins than net,
Okay.
because that probably gives me a more direct measure of their efficiency in the actual production of what they're doing. But I would, for instance, take a look at something as simple, who's got a higher cash balance? Because if Lennar's got $2 billion and Pulte's got 100 million, that tells me something. I don't care about who's got a higher, how much cash do they have to service debt, right? All of a sudden, it's 2008. And by the way, we started this case study, I started doing this in 2009, and the very first company I did doesn't exist anymore. It actually went into bankruptcy shortly after it did. It was a company in the west coast of Florida called WCI Homes. It was the old Westinghouse Communities. Went bankrupt, came back, and then somebody bought them. Did Lennar buy them? So Lennar ultimately, but after they came out of bankruptcy. But in 2008, 2009, what was important? How much cash did you have? How much debt did you have? Sorry. How much equity did you have? So, and we'll go through some ratios now. When we talk about financial position or condition, we want to talk about how much holding power do we have? Do you follow? I didn't say which company was more profitable, right? I said which one's in better financial position, right? So, did any of us look at maturities of debt?
Yeah.
So you did?
And the other question, because it said the liabilities coming.
No, but did you look and say, okay, well, yeah, Lennar's got $5 billion worth of debt coming up next year, and Pulte's doesn't have anything coming out for 5 years. So the point I'm just trying to bring here is depending on what you're looking for, you're going to do different type analysis or you use different tools, right? So jumping ahead, when we talk about going concern, what's going concern?
If the company's gonna be able to last,
Pay its bills
has
for a
enough
year.
financial money to be able to pay their obligations and then.
Financial money as opposed to non-financial money?
Well, can they pay their obligations? Can they pay their obligations?
Okay.
For a
For
year.
how long?
A year.
Forever.
Unlimited,
A year, forever, a little bit?
unlimited.
Until they.
Yeah. So what you probably won't find in your Google searches, in the trade, going concern talks to a period of a year. So the real question is, when an auditor is going, because part of, we talked the other day that if a company was not viewed to be a going concern, you would have to report under what's called liquidation basis, because the assumption would be the company's going to go into bankruptcy and it's going to be liquidated. And so then you've got to write down assets to what their liquidation value are. When an auditor writes an opinion, one of the basic premises of, again, going back to one of the basic tenets of accounting, is that a company is a going concern, i.e. it's going to operate indefinitely into the future. From a practical perspective, and an auditor is going to look at a period of a year. Does it have the financial wherewithal to last for a year? So, why do I say that? If I'm going to look at P&L ratios, I probably am not going to look for, survivability for very long periods of time. Okay? Because as we said, what happened in 2008 with all the home builders? What happened to all their sales when all of a sudden, when Lehman Brothers went bust, right? And everybody trembled, who closed on a house? Nobody. So, was it good to have a lot of inventory? Maybe not. So, it may be good if you've got like, what's backlog? Let's go through, now I'm doing the streams of consciousness that some of you guys gave me. What's backlog? So maybe it's great to have good inventory, more so than other people, already entitled, right? But what happens if there's no sales? Is it good to have a lot of inventory? Maybe not. What's backlog?
Homes you sold
don't have inventory with owners.
Homes you've sold?
No, demand and
So they are contracts that you've entered into to deliver a home, but you have not, well, you haven't recognized that, but you haven't closed, so you have not performed. So you essentially have an obligation, you're both committed, right, onto a transaction, right? So backlog is all the contracts that are going to represent future sales, which you're building, but you haven't delivered yet. What are the trends in that? Most of these companies, what were the trends? What were your answers?
97%.
What is 97%?
3% cancel out.
Okay, so you looked at it from the perspective of most of those backlogs close. Okay, that's a good point.
I got 50% cancellations across 3 companies, average.
So this guy's got a lower, a lower retention or a bigger sort of, wipeout. What other observations can you make about? Because I can think of I'm going to tell you the one I'm going to think about. I didn't see anybody right. So the question was, is backlog good or bad? And we said it's good. It's good because it's future sales.
It's not good because it's not done yet.
Because that's revenue you should have on this side of the house. So there's a catch-22 thinking. Anytime you're in a production environment, it sounds like having backlog is good. That's an unhappy customer. That's a customer that you're going to lose, potentially, because somebody else might be able to deliver. Okay? Risk factors. Forget cutting. A lot of you say, well, I think these are the important ones, but you can tell me why. I want to know why. Were there any ones that weren't disclosed? I mean, I'm assuming we all use relatively recent 10Ks. Are there any concerns out there that weren't mentioned?
I said the rising sea levels.
Okay, no, listen, I got some.
Trade war with
rising.
China?
Yeah, hold on. So we got rising sea levels. Okay, I mean that depending on where you're located, that might be an issue.
Trade war with China.
And what's the impact of a trade war with China?
Workers, skilled labor.
Construction equipment,
Construction, yeah.
building materials.
Probably not equipment, probably materials.
Well, John Deere and bulldozers.
Okay, but my belief is, I could be wrong, a lot of the equipment that's built by Caterpillar and Deere and all that is for their market. Because the cost of shipping that stuff here would probably be prohibitive. There may be components that go into building some of that come here. But I would tell you probably materials is an issue. Okay? Now, it could be the cost, but it could be the other way I mean, China's also at risk, right? And they've been big consumers. You might actually, have a huge plummet in material costs too. You don't know, because they consume a lot of steel and they consume a lot of concrete. So, I don't know. What else? You were saying there was another issue with the trade war with China. I mean, just might have an economic decline here. All of a sudden, people lose jobs, right?
Immigration reform?
Yeah, I put that down.
Okay.
Availability of adequate land in desirable locations.
Yeah, I would imagine that most home builders, and you may not have had it in yours, I don't know that I'm familiar with MVR. Most home builders already have that, especially if they're active in states like Florida and California. They typically would put that as a risk factor. Because there's plenty of land in Florida. The question is how much of it is suitable for them, or entitleable, if that's a word. Yes, Ryan?
So the one that I found, they definitely mentioned the change in competition, driving up the costs and having to squish margins, but I don't think they talked to kind of a disruptive potential for home building to kind of experience with technology, and I kind of looked into.
Yeah, and there might, there might be a risk there. I mean, did anybody mention, for example, I mean, I'm not, did anybody mention things like is Airbnb a risk to home ownership? No, probably not. Is co-living? We haven't seen co-living here. It's starting to happen in Europe. Just like we've got co-working.
Well, Fort Lauderdale,
They're developing it.
yeah, PMG is
The
building.
X Tower in Miami.
So there's
They're
a
building
co-living
X
there,
Tower in
okay?
Fort Lauderdale.
So, is that going to affect home build? Are there, so there's a bunch of stuff. It was to get you thinking. Let's talk about shareholders, because I think that's an important one. Some of you got your answers right. So,
Which question?
is there a controlling shareholder? So I don't know all the particular companies. Most home builders come out of a family, come out of somebody. And most home builders have, like in the case of Lennar, have dual class shares. And a controlling family or the controlling shareholder, when they go public, will always keep voting control by maybe owning all the shares, Class A shares. Guys that have Google did it. The Ford family still controls Ford, even though they only own like 5% of the economic interest in the company. They've got more than 50% of the voting rights. Okay? So Lennar definitely has a controlling shareholder. I think Stuart Miller only owns 30% now. He used to own more than that, but he controls the company because he's got voting control. But it goes further than that. I remember, I haven't looked at D.R. Horton in a while. Who looked at D.R. Horton? Who's the chairman?
Oh, I can't remember
Mr.
the
Horton.
name.
Mr. Horton.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah.
How much does he own?
I didn't see. Not a controlling.
Very little. But let me ask you, if he's the namesake of the company, he's the chairman, president, and CEO, and you've got this huge diverse shareholder base, and he's got 3%, might he be able to control? It's definitely going to be significant and definitely influential, right? He's definitely going to have all the institutional guys behind him, or he wouldn't be there.
Right.
So when he votes, so people talked about like Blackstone and all these other, BlackRock and all these other, so institutional guys may have significant chunks. Those guys are not controlling shareholders because they don't take any active role in a company. But in home builders in particular, you typically have a person or a family that may not have economic control, but may have significant or sufficient enough shareholding, right? And may have the position to really be the controlling shareholder and do. The Pulte's had an issue with that not long ago. Who did Pulte? How much is Pulte? The family, very little.
They had about like 7 or 8%.
Yeah, but there was one branch of the family that was running. It was a lawsuit 2 years ago because one branch of the family was running it, and they basically, whatever they said, what? There was another group, and they only owned a small sliver. So you have to be careful with, one thing is having majority ownership, and the other one is having control. And control is not always, what did it say? Possession is 9/10 of the law. When you're in charge, it weighs a lot. It means a lot. Okay. So anyway,
Call that soft power when your name's on the company.
yeah. Okay. So what is most of these guys? They generated their income through what? Primarily what? Home building. So a lot of them have financial subsidiaries and all that, but home building is the bulk of their business. Why is home builders operate in a totally decentralized fashion? You know, one question that I asked was, how that might carry over to a traditional merchant developer model. And I didn't really get answers on that. So what's a merchant developer? Do you work for a merchant developer?
My merchant developer.
Do you work for one?
Basically.
I would say so, yes.
Yeah, you do. You're a guy who...
I just know the definition of a merchant developer.
A merchant developer is, a merchant is a guy who buys and sells.
Okay, yes.
So a developer, most developers are merchant developers. They identify properties, they acquire them, they develop them or redevelop them, and they sell them, and they make a profit. So they buy and sell for a profit. Now, that's not to say they may not hold some equity interest in some buildings or in ventures over time. Most developers in this country are merchant developers. How does this home building model work with development? How does that correlate? I asked the question, how do you think the advantages and disadvantages of being a decentralized home builder correlate to development? So what are the advantages of operating in a centralized basis?
Yeah, maybe decreasing costs.
Lower cost, right? So you have one accounting department, one purchasing department, right? Maybe even one marketing head. What's the advantage of operating in a decentralized environment?
Well, it would be that instead of having everything in one area, so if one part of the business was to go under, it's just that
Right,
one
but what's the
spot.
advantage of that as opposed to all being in one place?
Less risk.
James?
Well, you have access to the same services, but that's risk in case one of them goes under.
Diversification.
I'm gonna be a little softer for a second and tell you, yeah, so those are all benefits, but you're closer to your customer. You're closer to your customer and you know your market.
Branding and marketing.
Okay? And so a lot of these home builders still operate under different brands that they bought in other places, for example. What are those things called? Like, so CVS owns Navarro, right? You ever been to a Navarro?
Oh.
What's Navarro? It's like a Cuban drugstore. But it's like a CVS, but they still call it Navarro. And so they know, and so they've got like agua de violeta or whatever mothers put on their kids' hair and stuff like that. They put stuff. What does Winn-Dixie own in Dade County? Sabor y Más. What does Publix own in Dade County? Isn't it, what's it called? Fresco or something?
That's the
Masa, what?
Public Sabor.
Okay, all right. So the home builders, when you're closer to your customer, you're quicker response time, more market knowledge, and now let's talk about the value of that in merchant development. Why don't you have many large national development firms? To begin with,
Specialized local knowledge.
because you, especially as it relates to planning and code, and in all those areas, know-who is much more important than know-how. It's much more important know-who than know-how. Okay? And so, developers and why large financial institutional investors in real estate look for local partners or developers are because they've got the local knowledge. They've got the access to the customers, and they understand how to navigate the local, practices. Okay, and that's why the model. There's very few national developers. Hines is out there. Tishman's out there. Sorry. Brookfield is really it's really an asset management business. I mean, and they operate some of their businesses under a REE, some of it under private equity measure, but they're not really developers in the merchant development sense. Okay, is fixed debt better than variable debt, or worse?
Depends on your percentage.
Okay, it depends on what, because that's well, it depends. It's good. I got a lot of these. Yeah, I think it's good. Most of the rate is fixed rate, and I think it's good. If you got that one, take half a point off. I haven't seen anybody mark. It's amazing how people don't like to look at their work critically. And it's easy when you're the outsider and you got a red pen in your hand. No. What does it depend on? Yes, Anthony.
It depends on the risk. That's the interest rates are going to change in the positive favor or in a negative favor.
Well, what do you mean
over a
positive?
period. In terms of, let's say you're in a variable interest rate, and you know that right now you can only attain a 5% interest if you were doing fixed, or you could see a potential drop in interest rates in the variable, for example. Maybe right now you're at 6, but for a majority of it, you're going to be in maybe the 2s or the 3s.
Okay, so if your provision, if your provision or your perspective is that interest rates are going to rise, and you need to hold debt for long term, you may want to fix it, because you're going to pay a lower rate today, and you're going to pay a known rate today, right? Better today than, you know, the promise, better hand, what is it?
Bird
Bird in the hand than 2 in the bush, right? Better to know. Now, you can match your cash flows, you know what you've got. If you think, or you have the perspective that interest rates are going to drop, you may not want to fix them, because you think you're going to be able to attain a lower interest rate at some point in the future. Okay? What's a warranty? A warranty is a guarantee.
I'm more than that, but yeah.
But a guarantee is one thing. John, I got an attorney here. He's going to give me the right answer.
It covers potential construction defects.
Sorry?
It covers potential construction defects.
Okay, so it's some sort of promise. And then let's talk about a home builder. Yes, James?
I put guaranteeing the quality of material and workmanship and the things for
I wouldn't use the word guarantee, because a guarantee is something and a warranty is something else. But it is a promise or a representation of a certain quality, and you're going to backstop it somehow. Now, how do the home builders protect themselves? The more important one is, how do you protect yourself? If you provide a warranty to somebody, how do you protect yourself?
Put a time limit on it.
You put a time on it.
No, you make your vendor give you a warranty.
Okay, so now we got a guy that's thinking here. I'm not saying you guys weren't thinking. Yeah, you can put a time limit on it, but you backstop it by doing one of two things. You may be able to insure, and some of these guys may be able to insure some of it away to the extent that it's material. But typically what you're going to do is you're going to work with good subs, and you're going to push that warranty onto them.
How so?
It's part of your contract with them. You force them to warranty your work. So when I go to the GC and I said my roof failed, he's going to say,
Call the roofer.
And the roof goes out there.
so you push it off to your subs. Ultimately, somebody else is backstopping it.
Especially on condos.
Well, it could be in anything, but yeah, you're definitely going to find, I mean, condos is a whole other issue where you get owner associations already going, there's engineering groups out there that will come and identify all the construction defects up front to, okay. Anyway, I'm not going to go through the rest of this. I want to cover some other material, but you guys understand, you see why the why is more important than the what? And the purpose of these things, the learning process is not just to quote, get the answer, okay? The purpose of this is to go a little bit beyond that. Now, I'm going to give you guys a little brief, who's had a finance class in college? Who's had finance classes in college? Most of us, right? No? Yeah. Okay. Sorry to hear that. It's the most exciting subject there is. Who's had economics classes? So some of this stuff might be helpful. We use in, I'm going to keep repeating. We accumulate historical financial information for a variety of reasons. And one of them is to benchmark, because we want to know how we are today versus where we were yesterday. Are we better or worse? We want to benchmark versus what our expectations were, our forecasts. So the provisions that we made, the goals that we set for ourselves, did we meet them? Did we do better? Did we do worse? And the third reason we want to benchmark is we want to say, how are we doing compared to other people that do the same thing that we do? So how do we benchmark? Well, the easiest way to do, the easiest sort of technique that one can use is what's called ratio analysis. And ratio analysis is where you take certain components of your financial statements and compare them to others to give you a sense of where you are compared to where you were, compared to where you were expecting, or compared where you were to others. So for example, having used the home building case study, the question that, you know, I asked about financial condition. A home builder A may be in better financial position because they have a lower debt to equity ratio, or they have more working capital than another one. They may operationally be more efficient because they have a higher gross profit than another one, okay? They may be less risky because they have a higher debt service coverage ratio, okay? So we can draw certain comparisons between companies, or we can say, hey, we're improving. One of the things that you see companies that tend to acquire others and incur a lot of debt will always address in subsequent periods their coverage ratios. You know, we're lowering, you know, our EBITDA is increasing, or our EBITDA's ability to service debt is increasing. So people are always very sensitive to that. So when we talk about ratio analysis, there's a gazillion out there. A gazillion. The mother lode of all this stuff, and if anybody wants it, I put something together, I'll gladly send it to you. It's a one-page, there's something known as DuPont Analysis. And who is DuPont, or who is DuPont? A French guy. E.I. DuPont de Nemours was the large chemical company. It's now part of Dow DuPont, right? So they merged with DuPont. But if you want Florida history, the heir to the DuPont fortune had a sister.
Really?
No.
Sounds weird from Steve, single.
Had a wife. And the wife's brother was a guy named Ed Ball. Ed Ball. Does that ring a bell to you? No. Ed Ball. So DuPont, okay. DuPont married a lady, I don't remember her name, and her brother was a guy named Ed Ball. So who knows where that, I think it's the Aston Martin. No, what's the big tower going out in the mouth of the Miami River, next to the Epic?
Yeah, what's called?
It's like the Aston Martin Tower. That's
The Porsche Tower?
Porsche, different tower. No, it's Aston Martin. It's Aston Martin. This guy paid $120 million for 2 acres.
Yeah.
$120 million for 2 acres.
Next to
Anyway,
the-
that's called Ball Point. That's called Ball Point. So Ed Ball was a crusty old guy. Lived in a hotel in Jacksonville. But Ed Ball started buying bonds in a company called Florida East Coast Industries, which owned a railroad that I worked for. But he started buying bonds, and he operated his company in bankruptcy he controlled it through receivership from like 1929 to like 1964 when it went public again.
Wow.
But he also then controlled something like 80% of a company called St. Joe, which for many years was the largest property owner in the state of Florida. So this crusty old little man, and then the other thing they owned was, no, he was he lived to be 100. He lived in a hotel room, like a dingy hotel room in downtown Jacksonville for his whole life. And they controlled something that was really probably the most powerful bank in Florida for many years, which is called Florida National Bank. And if everyone wants to see the most beautiful building in downtown Miami, it's the DuPont building. Have you ever been to the DuPont? Have you ever been to the lobby of the DuPont building? Nobody's been to a wedding there or whatever? It's a gorgeous building. It used to be the main branch of Florida National Bank. But anyway, I said the other day the most beautiful building in South Florida is the Hialeah racetrack. You guys ever been to You guys have never been to the clubhouse at the Hialeah?
Architectural field trip?
No, that's for another. Who's your construct? Get Tomas to do that. Doesn't he love field trips? He loves field trips, doesn't he? Where do you guys want to go, to the debit factory? We'll go to the widget factory, okay? Okay, so there's something called, the finance people at DuPont at the turn of the century came up with something called DuPont Analysis, and ultimately they built from something called ROA, return on assets, and I'll go to that in a second. And they sort of decompose that. And it's a very interesting, it's kind of the mother lode of how do you break down a company. But I'm going to tell you that there are a series of ratio type analysis, ratios that we kind of take a look at. We look at liquidity, we look at leverage, we look at activity, and then there's a whole bunch of other ones out there that I'm going to mention. So some of these you might use more over time, some you might use less. Let me pop in here profitability. Okay, and they're sort of like families of different things. So liquidity ratios talk to a company's, what was that word you used? Financial money? It's liquidity talks to an entity's ability to quickly monetize, okay? So it's you know, do they have cash, do they have current, they have coin, right? Leverage talks to skin in the game. So this talks to the capital stack. Whose money's supporting the assets here? How much debt, how much equity? Activity talk to, and I'll break some of these down. I'll give you some examples of some of these. Activity talks to operational efficiency, turnover ratios. How quickly does your inventory turn? How quickly do you collect your receivables? Okay? Profitability, well, I don't want to define profitability by saying it's how profitable you are, because but how much money are you making? And there's a couple of measures there, and then there's a whole bunch of other ones that I talked to in this class, and you'll hear in other classes, which I think are important, okay? So let's start with liquidity ratios, okay? And there's basically three liquidity measures of liquidity that we talk about. The first one is we talk about something called working capital. Does anybody know what working capital is? We talked the other day, we talked the other day about classifying balance sheets in company, where we broke down assets between current and long-term, and liabilities between current and long-term. Okay, Ryan, what was your answer now?
It was current assets minus current liabilities.
Okay, well, we had to define what current assets were first. So current assets are assets whose expected realization is within a year, and current liabilities are assets whose current realization or maturity is within a year. So for example, I'll give you an example. Cash is a current asset. Accounts receivable, trade accounts receivable are current assets, because typically you sell with the expectation of getting paid in 30, 60, probably no more than 90 days. Yes?
Repeat that, please.
Cash, accounts receivable.
Current assets, and another one was what?
Current liabilities. I'll get to liabilities. So current assets are things like cash, accounts receivable, inventories. Typically you buy or manufacture an inventory to sell in a relative short period of time. You don't build something today to sell it 2 years from now. You don't buy something today to sell it 2 years from now. That's inventory. That may be an investment, okay? All right? Prepaid. We talked the other day. You may prepay a land planner or a designer for something he's going to do now in the short term. Current liabilities are accounts payable. You buy something from somebody with the expectation that you're going to pay them in 30, 60, 90 days. Wages payable, payroll taxes payable. The current portion of long-term debt. I have a mortgage for 30 years. Whatever payments I have in the next 12 months would be current. The rest would be long-term. So current assets and current liabilities are assets and liabilities whose maturity or realization level is expected to be within the next year. So the easiest measure of working capital is to say current assets less current liabilities. If this is positive, if this is greater than 0, what kind of conclusion can we arrive?
To making money?
Solvent.
No, no. If my current assets exceed my current liabilities, what conclusion might we derive? Is that good or bad?
It's good. It's good.
It's good.
Yeah.
Okay, why is it good?
Because
You own more than you.
I like the word, you're a going concern. Within a year, you should have enough money to pay all your obligations.
Yeah.
So generally, in the context of working capital, that's good. Now, we can break this down into a couple of different ways. Some people talk about something called a current ratio. And a current ratio is basically the same information but looked at as a ratio. So we go current assets over current liabilities. So what would we look for something here that would be good?
Positive number.
Over 1. Something greater than 1 would be good. Something less than 1 would be bad. Okay? The implication there would be that current liabilities are greater than current assets. And then you're not in a good place. Okay? Well, you might get there. Okay? And then there's a further iteration of this that people like to take a look at, and they call it the quick ratio. Okay? And what would the quick ratio be? Something quick, right? So the quick ratio is current assets less inventory over current liabilities. That's actually a lower number than this, obviously, because most companies, not in real estate, but most companies have inventories. And the reason they exclude inventories is because there's usually a lot of risks associated with inventory. There may be obsolescence. It may not turn over as quickly. And so people like to say, hey, other than inventory, do they have enough cash and receivables to pay what they owe currently? Okay? So those would be the major liquidity ratios that you would see out there. So these are tools to use when you're extending credit. And so for example, if you're leasing space to somebody, are you extending credit? I mean, if I just define a lease as a financing arrangement, right? And you own something that you're paying a mortgage on, and you're letting somebody use that space in exchange for a promise to pay you in the future, are you extending credit? I think you're extending credit. So should you not analyze their financial condition? You probably should, right? When we talk about leverage ratios, like I said, that talks to skin in the game. Okay? There's a couple of ways to look at this, okay? But basically it's a relationship between debt and equity. Okay? So we can look at it as a ratio exactly like debt to equity, right? So how many dollars of debt do we have for equity? Right? So we might see something like 2 to 1. We might have 3 of capital, 2 debt, 1 equity. What's the implication here? You're playing with other people's money, right? Now, that may be good, but you got to take a look at your industry group, okay? And then really, so that's one way to look at it. The other way to look at it is to take a look at debt as a percentage of your total capital stack. Okay, so debt over total assets. As you can say, I'm levered, here would be 3, so I'm levered 67%, right? Because we know total assets is debt plus equity, right? So 2 over 3 is 67%, right? Was that too quick?
No.
You guys got that? So that's just 2 different ways of looking at the same thing. I'm financed 2 to 1, or I'm levered 67%. Now this all tends to get backstopped by something that Ryan mentioned a little while ago, which I'm going to call DSCR. Some people call it something else, but it's coverage. Coverage. And what is debt service coverage ratio? You mentioned it, so you got to know, right?
I'd like to share the wealth.
How much of your NOI
These guys know.
in proportion to your debt?
So I'm hearing NOI to debt.
Current debt.
I'm hearing current debt. So far, I don't have the right answer, but I'll keep writing.
It's the amount of equity you put in to be able to
Is your
attain the
interest
debt.
service?
No, it's how much money you actually have to pay the debt. You don't want to go over your operating income, like your break-even point is, let's say, $10.
No, break even, you got cold.
Okay.
I mean, break even's important, but you just got cold. Yes, Ryan?
Is it cash money, cold hard cash money?
Cash money,
Yeah.
as opposed to like
The financial kind.
financial cash money.
Yes, sir.
So financial cash money over what? Okay, let me shortcut it, because we're running out of time. So there's a lot of different coverage ratios out there, as you're gonna see in the case study this week. But typically, it's gonna be some measure, I'm gonna say net income over debt service. Okay, so it's not your cash balance, it's not your NOI, it's typically the cash that you have available after you've serviced everything, okay? So in order to address now, some people might use EBITDA, okay, as a measure. That's a very common one people use. Some people at times talk about fixed charge ratio, okay? So it might not just be debt, but obligations under capital leases and things like that. Some people might use I lost my train of thought right now. But it's going to be a measure of cash flow to service your debt. Cash flow to service your debt. Okay? The higher the number, the better off you are. That means you're generating more in your operations in order to service debt. So if you're a creditor, you want to see a higher number, right? So if a company covers debt service 3-to-1, it's going to be better one that covers 1-to-1. In commercial mortgages in this country, what do we typically see as a debt service coverage ratio?
1.35? 1.35.
Okay, I mean, it's going to be whatever, but I'd say 1.25 is a pretty common one. So, but a bank is going to look for you. A bank is going to look for you to be able to generate more cash flow than what you have to service every year, because they want to get paid.
I want to make sure that they get paid.
That they get paid. Activity ratios, there's a couple of them that we like to do. And as it relates to current assets, so as it relates to accounts receivable, we look at days sales and inventory. I'm sorry, days sales outstanding, DSO. Days sales outstanding. Okay? And so, what does that mean? Okay, I want to give you an easy example. I sold $1,000 last year. I have $300 in accounts receivable at a particular point in time. How many days sales do I have in receivables? It's going to be magic. Divide 1,000 by 365 days, right? So that tells me every day I sold $2.74. If I have $300 in receivables, that must mean that I have 109 days outstanding. I have 109 days of sales outstanding to be collected. Almost a third of my sales haven't been collected. Is that good or bad?
No.
Bad. Why?
Relying on your notes, not relying on your own assets instead of finances.
So number one, you got to finance this somehow. Number two, Andrew?
You haven't been paid.
Yeah, shit out of luck. I mean, you know, you're SOL. I mean, but what should it be? What are normal trade terms? I mean, when
Net 30, maybe. 220 net 30 or something? Oh, no,
That's not reality, though.
net.
so there's kind of an adage that people give you 2% discount if you pay in 10 days, and that, so you would pay the 30. So in this country, what are normal terms?
90 days, 6 months. Depends on who you are.
Maybe 40 days.
30 days.
Yeah, so I mean, look, a very sort of standard thing in this country is most transactions are given 30-day terms. So if you have 109 days receivables outstanding, what is that, good or bad?
3 months behind.
Probably not good. In loans in this country, anything over 90 days, you got to reserve, okay? Time is, what does time bring?
Uncertain.
Uncertainty. So somebody hasn't paid you. If somebody hasn't paid you in 109 days, if somebody hasn't paid you in 109 days, what's the likelihood you're going to get paid? There's typically a problem, and that problem is going to be somebody has an inability to pay you or an unwillingness to pay you. Okay, so you need both in order to pay. You can also do an aging, okay? And I'm not going to show you how to do that, but an aging kind of tells you how many dollars you have from 0 to 30, how much you have from 30 to 60, how much you have from 60 to 90, and how many you have beyond. And so that also is a measure of how good your collections or your ability. And the more you start having dollars out there, the less likely you're going to be to collect them, okay? I'm not going to go over inventory turnover, but it's basically your inventory balance over your cost of goods sold divided by 365. So it's a measure of how quickly, you know, if you have $100 of inventory, right? And last year you sold $1,000 of goods, right? Going back to the thing, you sold 2.74, right, of goods every day. If you've got 100, you've got, what's that, 30 some odd days of inventory in stock. Is that good or bad? It's probably not that bad. Inventory's rotating. If it's rotating every 30 days, how often is it rotating a year? Like 12 times. That's good. Inventory comes in, it stays fresh, it doesn't go obsolete, it doesn't go bad, you turn it over. Okay? We're running out of time, we've got to do a quiz. Profitability we've talked about. Profitability, there's two big measures that we talk about, right? Gross margin and net income margin. What is gross margin? What is gross margin?
Divided by NOI. Revenue divided by NOI.
Door number 2. Okay, an income statement was started with what? Revenues. What do you subtract from revenues?
Cost of goods.
Cost of goods sold. What do you get from that?
Gross margin.
Gross margin. What is gross margin percentage?
Is it percentage of revenue?
So what percentage did you make from your sales? What percentage did you make from your sales? What do you have below gross margin? I kind of said this sort of generically the other day. You can generically say selling, G&A, maybe R&D if you're, you know, a design firm or a, you know, biotech or whatever. What do you have after that?
Net margin.
What?
Net margin?
No, you're not net yet. So you got EBIT, then you got interest, then you got taxes, right? Then what do you have? Net income, right? What's net income percentage or margin?
Over revenue?
Net income
Profit margin.
over revenue. So your net profit margin, net income margin. What does this talk to? Your profitability on your sale. What does this talk to?
Organization.
Your profitability overall. Okay? Because now this includes how efficient is your capital stack, is your tax planning, is your marketing effort, is your administrative effort. This directly talks to how much money do you make on the sale of your product. Some companies need a high margin because they've got huge marketing costs, for example, right? I'm just going to give you three or four other ones. There's a whole bunch of other ones. Going back from the DuPont analysis, there are two critical ones. ROE and ROA. ROA is unlevered return. So it would be net income over total assets. ROE, which is really the motherlode of looking at your return, is net income over your equity, right? So ROA is, this is essentially net income over debt plus equity, right? But if you really want to take a look at what you've invested, if you really want to take a look at what your return on what you've invested, ROE. This is the overall return on the invested capital. This is the return on your equity. We talk about a couple of other things. We talk about EPS, earnings per share. What's earnings per share?
Net income per.
So it's net income divided by
Outstanding.
shares outstanding. We've talked about PE ratio. I mentioned that in the first class. PE. Right. So that is price per share, right, divided by earnings per share. What is this a measure of? So this is how much profit each individual owner makes, or each individual unit of ownership makes. What does this talk to? We've talked about this before. What is this akin to? What do we call, what is what's a proxy for this, or a parallel for this in real estate? Cap rate. And cap rate's kind of the inverse of that, right? Because it's kind of earnings over price, right? NOI over value. So price earning is kind of, and not just people outside of real estate look at it differently. Let me see if there's any other ones I want. There's a whole bunch of other ones, but we're not gonna. Okay, let's do really quickly like 3 questions.
Okay.
I wrote out like 15 questions, but I'm only going to ask 3. Because I can't really read my handwriting. I didn't have time to type it yesterday. I wasn't in, no, the reality is we did cover some of this material, and I just want to make it quick. So, are we ready?
Yes.
Okay, can we put away our, yeah. Okay. Question number one. I mean, I can make them really easy, right?
Yeah.
Okay, I'll make this easy. First one. It's a repeat of one from last week. Please give me 3 sections from a typical annual report, 10K annual report. Give me 3 sections. Since you're very good, can you write down next week? I want to go over surety of the liens. Yeah, we did performance, payment and performance bonds, okay? Okay, question number two. Question number two. I'm gonna be critical in judging and grading this one. Why do auditors report to the board of directors? Why do auditors issue their opinion to the board of directors? I want complete answers. I don't want one word. One word's not gonna get it. Question number 3. What is the 10-year treasury yield today?
Like a range, we could do a range?
Give me a number, and I will, give you 2 or 3 bips either way,
No,
tenths, no, I'm not gonna give you 10 bips, I might give you 3 or 4 leeway, I can give you a 4th question if you want one other.
Yeah, give us one more.
Everyone's just like, I mean, you wanna give me an answer?
Okay. You want it?
Not anymore.
That's not extra credit. I'm trying to find one I think that would be easier from these.
Fixed and variable.
What concept are we concerned about when we're dealing with sales of real estate? What concept are we concerned about when we're talking about sales of real estate?
You're asking about one concept?
Yes, one concept. Now, if you don't know what the concept is, but you know what the ramifications are, I'll take the ramifications. What concept are we concerned about when dealing with sales of real estate? What are we concerned about? What are we concerned about when we're talking about sales of real estate? What are the concerns? What are the concerns that we have when dealing with sales of real estate?
Relative to accounting.
Relative to what I spoke about in this class. Relative to, I think I used that term like 5 or 6 times today, actually. There's a term, but I'll take the sub-issues. You don't want a 5th one?
No,
We still have 3 questions.
You're going to remind me.
I got it.
You're going to remind me that, because we didn't go over sureties. Thank you. Have a nice afternoon. You likely will not get the case study today. You'll probably get it tomorrow.
Cool.
Okay? But Armando, don't sound so excited, dude.
I'm starving. I have to get something to eat right now.
Go get something to eat, dude. What's the 10-year treasury yield today? If you know the dollar, if you know the value at which it trades in relation to par, I'll give you an extra point. Because I'm gonna have to look it up to get that. I don't know the answer to that. Let me see. You're probably about there. Yeah, you're probably about there. Yeah. Thank you, Andrew. What concepts are we concerned with when dealing with sales of real estate? What concept? What concept?
Yeah.
What concept? Very good. At least I got one answer. One guy got it right.
Number 4?
Yeah, but don't go ask him.
Buddy?
Haley looks at it.
I don't know. Yeah, that sounds a lot.
That sounds feasible.
Oh my God. What do you guys look like?
3 questions
So
would
bad.
have been
Well, if you miss one out of 4, you only get 25 off. I mean, I had like 15 questions written down.
You know how it goes.
Sean, did you turn yours in?
No, I had mine here.
Andrew, yours came up with somebody? Okay. Marina, you bringing it up now? She's all excited about bringing it up. Not. She's folding it in half. She doesn't want me to read it. Thank you. Did anybody not turn it in? Did somebody take an automatic 0?
You made that? I was about to say, it smells good.
You had one to take
I can't make it.
Doesn't he always have one of those bowls?
Yeah.
We gotta distract him, like
Last
maybe
week he had like.
give him a bunch of water to go to the bathroom, and then when he's gone, we just make it go away. I appreciate it.
I'll be right back.
You too.
What was, oh, is everybody done? What was number 4? Just curious.
Everyone's done revenue recognition.
Yeah.
When
the sale is recognized.
and if you don't write recognition, you're concerned with whether we have a sale,
Yeah.
right? And whether all the conditions have met, or whether we can recognize how much profit we can recognize, whether there's continuing involvement.
I said when this sale is recognized. I'm like,
I think
couldn't get the word.
I probably wouldn't give you credit for that, because there's probably an implication there's been a recording, and a recording of a transaction doesn't necessarily mean that, well, if you've got continuing obligations, right? I've sold you the unit, but I still have to deliver a golf course or whatever,
Then there's always profit, right?
Bye-bye.
Then goal is profit. End goal is profit.
End goal is always profit.
There we go.
did you get the
I wrote profit.
End goal is always profit.
did you get the treasury?
Yeah.
Class was kind of long today, huh? I kind of sense it was, I don't know, I think people were dragged. I don't know if it was me or it was the class or both.
Yeah, I think it's just 4.5 hours.
It's long. Hi, Tracy, how are you?
Good, except we could not get that thing functioning properly last week. So I'm hoping we can.
I haven't touched it.
It was there,
No. I mean, what I said, all I did was roll it. I did not disconnect anything or play with any other things there.
yeah, I don't know what caused the.
And I didn't use it. I mean, all I did is the same thing that you saw. Now, I'll help you turn it on if you want.
Ryan, we ended up, it lost its connection to the desktop machine, and I ended up having to put a thumb drive directly into it, which just was not optimal, but.
Well, and you weren't able to, because I did use that last week.
That, we tried that, but it was out of focus.
Oh, yeah, well, I had that problem.
Yeah.
Yeah, that wasn't You wanna turn it on and while I'm here, and I mean, I haven't even gone to the computer today.
That's good, I mean, if you,
What do we call that?
PC is selected, there are no control, okay.
So we turn this on,
It,
but then I just gotta put an output. Oh, this is the input. The input's a PC, right?
yes, it says the PC is selected here.
Okay. Yeah, I didn't
It's
touch any
already
of this stuff.
selected.
Okay, and where does one turn this on? System off. So, hold on, it's in there you go, right there. Okay, so you got that, and let's see, does
Let me
this
get
work?
my,
Let me see, I want to check, 1 second, Tracy, look, let me see.
yeah,
How you doing?
Okay, so you can get on Mozilla, so hopefully,
yep,
sorry, I'm glad I
the
didn't.
magic is here,
It
thank you.
wasn't
And I didn't need to
Yeah,
blame
you
you.
gotta-
No, I know, it's the easiest thing is to say, hey, no, definitely the projector was out of focus last week.
Looks like it's good now.
Yeah, it looks like.
Well, it looks like it's good. So, yeah, now I gotta turn that off. Hold on a second. I hope now by turning this off, it only turned that off, that's it. I better get out of here before something else breaks.
Did you bet on the Preakness last week?
Yeah, you know, I got home and I didn't have a chance. I went to my parents and I left my dad the form. So then I just got home and kind of looked really quickly online. And I made a couple of bets, but no, I didn't hit anything. I mean, on the Derby, I had the second horse, but I didn't have anything last week.
After the disqualification?
After the disqualification. After the disqualification. So it would have been third without it. No, I did not hit it. I did not have any. I'm not sure that, I mean, if I had time, I'm not sure I would have picked that horse either. I mean, well, whoever tells you they really know,
No, my mom's big into horse racing.
Really?
She went to the Derby for the first time.
Did she?
Right.
I heard it's like mayhem.
Yeah, well, because our good friends are from Kentucky, so they took her up there and gave her, give her the
One of my buddies from high school has been going for years. And I say years, probably 20 years. And it's kind of odd, he's got a very peculiar, you would be surprised that he would go based on what his job is. But anyway, he really goes, yeah, but he now spends a whole week because he thinks it's a great week to gamble. He doesn't really gamble. I mean, he sent me, of just the Derby, he sent me like a 20-page summary. I mean, he's really into like the whole breeding, and then he looks at all these like, there's this experimental free base, and based on breeding, and this line and that line, and if it's raining, this one's a mudder, this one's not. But I mean, his point is, he said there's 20 horses, the odds tend to be favorable.
Yeah, 1 in 20.
Well, and usually more than that, because since it's the way the gamble.
Yeah, if you
the way the pari-mutuel works, it's like you could have a guy going 99 to 1,
Yeah.
And so, his perspective is that if you can identify the likely winner that's not the candidate or the combination. I know one year he hit a superfecta for $80-something thousand.
Superfecta is 1 through 3 or 1 through 4?
4. And I know he's walked away. I mean, he'll walk away. He makes very little money. That's why. And his retirement account is all what he's
just all from.
Yeah, and so but he really studies it. I mean, and when we were in high school. Yeah, when we were in high school. I mean, it's funny because we used to study organic chemistry, and we would we didn't actually use money, but we bet on the horses at Hialeah. And so we just always kind of liked it, but he took it to another level. Like he actually, knows all these different. I mean, I know some of the good horses. I can kind of, and you get your emotional favorites, right?
the names and like the.
I had, when I was turning 18, I could go to the, horse, because, I mean, it used to be you had to be 18 to go into a pari-mutuel track. And I had one of my dad's uncle who was late 70s, early 80s at the time, who was really big into horse racing, and I remember asking him, well, who do I bet on? What do I look at? And he said, give you a tip, never forget, he said, bet on the one you like. And I said, what do you know? And he goes, it could be the name, it could be the way he looks.
Yeah.
And so, like, for instance, I've got like, I got stupid things. Like, these are stupid things. If there's a race on grass and there's like an Irish filly running, or an Irish bred filly, I'll bet on that, There's certain horses that like if there's a horse that comes from a crypto clearance line, because I like crypto clears, I'll bet on him, Stupid,
Yeah, but.
which doesn't, but that's just, my eraser, I know I was leaving something behind. No, so look, it's gambling, it's not, and so anybody that tells you otherwise, there's no sure money, it's gambling, and so, yeah, at times you can make more educated. I like to look, like, for instance, the things I key on are, I like to look at the recent workouts, but even that could be a game, because maybe they're not really pushing the horse, or,
Yeah.
But I like to look at recent workouts, I like to look.
Also like the past races, right?
Sorry?
The past races?
You can, no, but they publish at the bottom of the, when you look at the racing form, like at the bottom of the,
So like past workouts is in like times for the track?
yeah, so what they'll do is like, the horses will go and they'll gallop every day, but they'll have like a formal workout. Hi Juliana, how are you?
Good, and you?
Good. Very sporty today?
Yes.
She came from the beach and she's going back to the beach.
Yeah, probably.
No, so they'll actually time workouts in the morning, and so there'll be some, but it's not scientific, and so I don't know how much.
Also the condition of the track's different.
But there'll be, so they'll run anywhere from 3 to 6 furlongs max, and so the time, and then they'll tell you he was like the fastest that day, or like he was
protected over the
57 out of 78 horses that worked at that distance. So I look at that, but I don't really know.
Yeah.
What do you look at when you bet, Juliana?
I don't bet.
You don't bet on anything? Alana, you either?
No. Yeah, I told my mom to stop doing it. She just plays the slot machines at casinos, but
Oh God, I don't like slot machines.
I don't know why she likes them either. And she only does like the quarter penny ones. I'm at this point. It'll be
Some
like
people,
$5.
it's some people. Well, I guess you don't even do that anymore.
It's
You
like a
just
high.
push.
It's like a high.
I think it's kind of like people playing video games. It's like a high. But you don't do like lotto? You don't want to win like Powerball?
I don't believe that.
My
The
girlfriend and I buy
chances are
every once in a while.
the probability of winning is just so slim.
Yeah, but for $2.
Oh yeah, no, for $2. But yeah, I just don't participate in those things. And
It's like
it's a
you're buying into the momentary, you're able to like dream about,
Yeah. You stop to think. I mean, I've already spent this money. I don't know how many times.
I used to get when I turned 18 years ago. My mom for my 18th birthday gave me like 10 those scratch tickets.
Scratch off.
And, like the most I got was like what, $50, and she was like,
Well,
"That's big."
the way the devil works is that day you would have won like 500, and you would have been addicted, because that's like the first time you go to the racetrack, you always win.
Yeah.
And then you go, wow, I'm good. I really do.
Beginner's luck is a blessing at first.
I haven't bought like a Powerball ticket probably in months. But I'll go some days where I'll buy one every week. I mean, I'll buy a couple of them. I don't think I'm going to win. Like, I don't spend the money.
Right.
But I also know if you don't buy it.
Yeah, my strategy of not buying and winning is not panning out.
It doesn't. If you don't buy, you definitely don't win. Now, if you buy.
You don't read the figures, huh?
No, if you buy, you buy. Yeah. Juliana, you have to be more positive. You have to be optimistic.
Someone has to win, right?
Yeah.
I went last year, a friend of mine got some tickets. There's like a big race they call the Pegasus at Gulfstream.
Yeah.
And it's like, so this friend, I don't know, some guy invited this friend of mine, and so I was his date because his wife didn't want to go. And so we sat at a table with a bunch of this other guy's friends, and the guy that sat in front of us was like a school teacher, and he won the lottery in Maryland.
Oh.
What?
And he won like $60 million one day.
Wow.
And so he's like, people were asking him, that's, he said, he goes, I'm looking at him like, he goes, it didn't really hit me, I was looking at the numbers, it didn't, and I was like, no, wait, and then he got really nervous,
Yeah,
I'd be so nervous.
But I also know that I set up this little foundation a few years ago, and the attorney I used had told me, and this was years ago already, he had 2 clients that had won the lottery and were bankrupt.
Believe it.
Because, it's, you spend as much as you have, or more.
Yeah, they don't have like the knowledge to manage the money or.
Plus if you, yeah.
People take advantage of you too.
Plus it's like, if you look, I don't know, like, I think these things are like at 300 or 400 million this week or something.
Yeah, I saw the
So, yeah, but like, 400 million isn't really 400 million.
It's like
It's 200 million.
100.
So if you get the lump sum, it's probably like,
Well,
let's call it 150.
Yeah.
And then, then you gotta pay 40% tax, right?
You're getting like 180 to 100.
Yeah, it's probably not worth it, Juliana. I mean, what's $100 million? I'm just gonna, I'm not gonna.
Might as well just save the $2.
Yeah, I'd rather, what's 2 birds in the hand is better than 100 in the bush.
Exactly.
No, but it's still, I mean, but somebody wins at some point.
Yeah, somebody wins. It's true.
Well,
So
Tracy,
it's unclaimed.
have a nice week.
It's for, or nobody wins in the.
Right.
We'll see you next week.
Yes.
Alana, we'll see you next week. Juliana,
Yes.
Andrew, Nate, we'll see you guys.
Take care.
Enjoy the afternoon.
Yes, sir.
Have a good
Thank
Memorial
you.
Weekend.
Yes.
I was gonna go, sadly, the people at the yacht club were gonna go to the RMC show, so I was gonna take my
yeah.
boat. They were all gonna wrap up, but they were leaving like at 12. By the time I get home and get out to the beach, it'll be like 3:30, so no. Maybe I'll go out tomorrow.
Where's that?
So the RMC show this weekend is in Miami Beach.
Okay.
So like at the southern tip,
Mm-hmm. I heard that.
and my boat's in Key Biscayne at the yacht club, so it's
Wasn't
not.
there just one in Fort Lauderdale though?
Yeah, there
Why did they
was.
split
And
it
that,
up? Like why?
wasn't it like 2 weeks ago or
It
3
was a
weeks?
few weeks ago. I just remember the formation jets buzzing
Flying over
around.
your office?
Yeah, buzzing around the downtown.
So then why have two?
I don't know, because different people sponsor, They used to, I mean, the first original one they ever did here was down at Homestead Air Force Base. And then they did it at Opelika Airport for a while. And I remember I was working at the time at a company that was right across the street. And I remember going up on the roof and they were literally, because we were there on the runway, it was frightening, because they'd pass you and then you'd hear the sound like, and it was, so, but yeah. Anyway, enjoy, bye-bye.
So you're gonna be here how long today?
I'm gonna be here till 3.
Oh,
The guest
okay.
speaker will be here before.
Okay, the guest speaker should talk about what today?
He's gonna talk about redevelopment, redevelopment agencies, redevelopment strategies,
Like an hour.
P3 project,
Say again?
Every hour.
I know, right?
public-private partnership.
Okay.
I guess they're just pushing
Sounds
back
good.
when they're done.
Yeah.
He is real estate manager for
That's Wall Street Journal article.
You reading it?
medical
Which one?
marijuana,
Just
but his, and he's also an attorney.
Oh, interesting.
He worked in redevelopment before coming to Florida for the cannabis business.
That's not like current, that's like, it's just like a,
The U.S. Civil War.
yeah, no, this is just about.
No, this is Wall Street Journal. It's a current.
So, are you,
No, but I mean, it's.
You work for a firm?
It's about.
Yeah.
is it your own firm or?
No, it's a large, it's
That's about
called
the Civil War battlefield.
It's called
They lose ground as
Greenberg
tourist draw, so people
It's the
aren't going
third
to.
largest firm in the country.
Wow.
We've got like 2,000 lawyers.
I wonder if that's an issue that not.
And do they work,
No, I think it's great. It's just,
Yeah,
you know, during, in
We have
1990,
40 offices internationally now.
and I have a question, because my sister's a real
Senator
estate
Ken
lawyer.
Burns produced a
And
documentary
assuming that
called The
each
Civil War.
lawyer that works for the
They're
company
probably really
is
the best
specialized in a certain
documentary
state.
everywhere.
Or do-
Never made it in
do-
the U.S.
In that, like, general,
You're like,
And it
have
just
to be
exploded,
They exploded
boom
the sites.
for Civil War. Visualization.
Bye.
Is
Is there a test that you could take to have you, have you be like,
Far along,
have in several
kind
states?
of comprehensive.
We have class the
The way
next
he
day
did
after
it.
graduation.
There is what's called a multi-state bar
Yeah, exactly.
exam, but it doesn't really have any effect. It's used by state bars. They include it as part of
We
the
had all
test,
kinds of
but if you pass it, it
people
doesn't
that
give you,
narrated.
you only pass it in the
Oh,
state
the
rating.
concert is literally on
It only counts in the state rating from 5 to 12.
Are they,
Exactly the entire
sites,
bar
the
exam.
location of the sites, where they
There
governed
are
by?
states that give one other
They're like,
state's reciprocity,
kind of like state
but
rights or-
Some are, some
Florida,
are local,
most,
like,
Florida
this
gives
is
you
one about the
that
same,
reciprocity,
this is about the same.
really, because, anyway, so most
Same.
states don't give reciprocity
This is, this
because
one's
we don't
called
grant
Jack
it.
Johnson, it's called Unforgivable
So
Blackness.
except for DC,
Oh,
I could probably join
The
the
first black heavyweight
DC
champion,
bar, and I think Colorado might give reciprocity to
1910.
Florida, in spite of the fact that Florida is bratty about it.
I see.
I figured that out overnight.
Jack Johnson was a crazy guy.
I think my daughter realizes all this.
I can't work from home because
Jack
of
London.
Yeah, I have on Friday. I have it on Friday.
Oh, on Friday?
It's in
31st, correct? That's a Friday. Rather than Thursday. Because I know, because I looked at his calendar beforehand and that wasn't on there. And then, yeah. I could be wrong, honestly. I'm just saying that would be great. Because then I don't have to like really rush to get here.
It wasn't too much. This is what they call Red Bull.
I'm gonna go, we need to finish from like 2 o'clock.
I mean, like, just like, the size difference, like, if you saw someone like going into a boxing ring like today, like, you know, you'd be like, oh.
Well, Burns was a small, for a heavyweight champion, fighter, yeah, and Johnson was huge. He used to Texas.
It's a good thing. I mean, I know the time.
To be like, we either show up a day early or show up after.
Decked out Ariana Grande stuff.
Here's our contract.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've never been to a concert.
I've never been to
I mean,
a concert.
I've been to Ultra, like
Access to this historical
Ultra, that's super heavy.
the white supremacy
Where's the TV screen? We should ask them about
innovated so
that. That was
inventive and
crazy.
extreme.
Back in March, right?
Not getting stopped and the film is stopped.
They don't want, they can't have it.
I thought it was like,
Huge steel Macintosh declared Jack Johnson the
we're
winner.
not there anymore.
Steve Steele McIntosh was the referee, but he's also the promoter. He was the promoter for the whole thing. Steve Steele
Oh, where
McIntosh.
they used to do it?
And so, and he also was the
But I'm just saying, like, you know,
referee.
What?
Hard Rock Stadium. Like, the parking lot.
Seminole Stadium?
That's where they're looking at?
Burns said a lot of stuff about it.
No, I said, I can't think of another area that will be playing on the side, that has to be. We too. Right there, you had a seat there.
Yep.
Right next to you.
You want to try?
Samuel L. Jackson.
The folk club.
I'm like,
we still went there.
Oh my God, can you hear
He go to the National Portrait Museum in Washington, D.C.
This is Rito boy?
Paintings.
Where'd you know?
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure it's.
Also, you know, say, we're Sunday.
Einstein is open?
No, they're closed, the doors kind of slightly open, so I walk in, so I'm closed.
Oh, wow, okay.
However much I want to, it's just
They were giving us what for.
Oh, really?
There's a door, they're closed, but if you want to go grab them, they're calling them out. We're supposed to close at 2 and close early. Excuse me.
Can I see Einstein's club, is Einstein's supposed to be open?
everything.
They're supposed to be open until 2, they closed at 1 today because they didn't have any customers.
Oh, we went there.
It would have had me.
And us.
But they're giving these away, so I don't want to parfait. It's just like lemonade and fruit punch.
Party together.
Yeah.